Well, kia ora koutou, good afternoon everyone. Good to see you all. Today I'm announcing the 9 ambitious public service targets that our government has set to get New Zealand back on track. Delivering better public services is one of our government's 3 key priorities, along with rebuilding the economy and restoring law and order. And we've made good progress already, but we are under no illusions about the scale of the challenges that we face as a country. Despite the hard work of our frontline staff on the ground, people like our brilliant police officers, doctors, nurses, teachers and principals, New Zealand has been going backwards over the last few years. The public sector, I think, was let down by the previous government, which scrapped public service targets, was distracted from the basics and failed to drive focus and delivery in the services that New Zealanders rely on. Every New Zealander deserves to feel safe in their homes, their businesses and their communities. Every New Zealander deserves to have confidence that if they or their loved ones get sick or injured, they will receive timely health care. Every child in New Zealand deserves the opportunity to succeed, and every parent deserves to know that when they send their child to school, that they are receiving, in fact, a world-class education each and every day. Law and order, health, education, work, housing and the environment, these, along with the economy, are the things that matter most to Kiwis. Our government is bringing back ambitious public service targets focused on improving results in these key areas. Some are very aspirational and will be very difficult to achieve, but our government was not elected to tinker or tweak while the big problems go unsolved. We are not elected to manage decline, so I make no apologies for being ambitious and having expectations in our public sector. I'll now take you through the 9 government targets to be delivered by 2030, and we have 2 health targets. The first is aimed at shorter stays in emergency departments, with 95% of patients to be admitted, discharged or transferred from an emergency department within 6 hours. The second is a target of shorter wait times for elective treatment. We want to see 95% of people wait less than 4 months for elective treatment. And there are also 2 targets aimed at reducing crime. The first of these is a target to reduce child and youth offending. We are targeting a 15% reduction in the total number of children and young people with serious and persistent offending behaviour. The second target is about having fewer victims of violent crime. This target aims to see 20,000 fewer people become victims of assault, robbery or sexual assault. And then we also have a target aimed at getting more people off welfare and into work. We want 50,000 fewer people on the job seeker support benefit because we are ambitious for Kiwis, and I don't know anyone in this country whose creativity and spark is best served by being a life on welfare. And as you know, education is a particular passion of mine, and the significant decline in educational achievement is a worry that does frankly keep me up at night. We have 2 targets aimed at turning that around. The first is we have to get our kids back to school, so we will have a target focused on increased student attendance. It is a national shame that 54% of our kids haven't been attending school regularly, and our target aims to get 80% of our students present at school for more than 90% of the term. And we'll have more to say about our plan tomorrow to achieve that. The second education target is to get more students at expected curriculum levels. We are targeting 80% of Year 8 students being at or above the expected curriculum level for their age in reading, writing and maths by December 2030. Our housing target is aimed at getting emergency housing back where it should be, needed really and only for brief periods, not a long-term place for people and families to live. This target aims for fewer people in emergency housing, with a 75% reduction of households in emergency housing. And finally, our target to get emissions down. We want to achieve reduced net greenhouse gas emissions and be on track to meet New Zealand's 2050 net zero climate change targets, with total net emissions of no more than 290 megatonnes from 22 to 25 and 305 megatonnes from 2026 to 2030. So as you can see, these targets will not be easy to achieve, but we are not here to do what is easy. We are here to do what is needed to tackle the big challenges that New Zealand has, no matter how difficult they may be. The targets are deliberately ambitious, and they will be challenging, and they will require the public sector to think differently, to dig deeply into root causes, to look at what's working in other places, and to be innovative and disciplined in directing resources to where they will have the greatest impact on outcomes. That is what New Zealanders expect and deserve. Part of why our government is so focused on rebuilding the economy is so that we can afford to invest in the public services that New Zealanders deserve. But we know that spending more money will not in itself deliver better results. Despite significant increases in spending under the previous government, New Zealanders got worse results from their public services. Our government has a different approach, one that is focused on improving outcomes by having a clear plan and real solutions, rather than just simply throwing money at a problem and hoping that it will go away. Delivery of the targets is the responsibility of a lead minister and also a lead public service agency CE, working in partnership with other ministers and agencies as appropriate. Progress towards these targets will be reported publicly every quarter so that New Zealanders can see what results they are getting from their taxes. Before we get into any questions about the targets, I'll just run through my movements for the remainder of this week. I am in Wellington until Thursday morning. I'll then be in Auckland until I leave for Southeast Asia on Sunday morning. I will be leading a mission to Singapore, Thailand and the Philippines alongside a senior business delegation. Southeast Asia, as many of you will know, is one of New Zealand's most significant export markets. Collectively, the region is the world's fifth largest economy and it accounts for just under 10% of all of New Zealand's exports, worth more than $9.1 billion in 2023. And with that growing prosperity and influence will come opportunities for more enterprise and partnership in New Zealand. A top priority for my government is bringing fresh energy and intensity to New Zealand's relationships offshore, re-engaging with our old friends and reaching out to new partners. Ministers across government are achieving that engagement in a range of areas: technology, commerce, defence and trade already. Southeast Asia is in particular a region that is more crucial than ever to New Zealand's prosperity and our security. So it's an exciting trip. It's the first bilateral visit by a New Zealand Prime Minister to Thailand and the Philippines since 2013. Singapore is obviously an old friend of New Zealand. I'm looking forward to being back there as well. The region's economy is growing faster than just about anywhere in the world, even as new challenges arise from the impacts of climate change and strategic competition. But with those challenges brings incredible opportunities for New Zealand, and I want us to be front and centre so that we are actually hustling and harnessing all of those possibilities from continued dialogue and stronger partnerships. Just in terms of House business, this week in Parliament we'll pass the Misuse of Drugs Amendment Bill. We'll also be progressing several treaty settlement bills, and on Wednesday there will be a Members' Day. And with that, I'm very happy to take your questions.
Prime Minister, just in terms of the serious young offenders, is that 15% target ambitious enough when thinking about pulling some of our most vulnerable and young people back onto the right tracks? Did you think about going higher than 15%?
Well, we've got about 1,100 young children or children and young people that are actually what we call serious or persistent offenders. And obviously, if we target 15%, we bring that down to about 900. For us, that's a starter. You know, we want to be able to set these targets. They are out to December 2030. If we feel we can achieve it quicker, faster, we'll continue to adapt them or adjust them. But for now, it would be pretty good to actually do what we're trying to do. Is, you know, we've had a decline in a lot of measures and outcomes. We've got to get it stabilised, and then we've got to start to improve them. And so that for us is a good starting point.
How realistic is 75%? How realistic is a 75% reduction in emergency housing, and where will they go?
Yeah, well, that's the benefit of picking these 9 targets is that it actually forces us to get into conversations about the root causes. So I appreciate we have other indicators, for example, on housing. You know, we want to make sure that we open up new houses for sale and purchase. We want to make sure we open up more in the rental market. We've obviously got to expand the social and state housing list as well. But by focusing on the emergency housing piece, it's actually going to force us to have conversations across the whole of the housing sector. And so for us, no, we've got to say that's enough is enough. You know, that has to be an ambition. You know, we want New Zealand, you know, to be one of the leading small advanced countries on earth, period. And for that to happen, we've got to set some pretty big ambitions. And I don't think 3,100 households waking up this morning in emergency housing and motels being there often for longer than 12 weeks is actually success.
That's around 2,000 households,
correct,
though, that you're trying to reach.
Down to about 800.
Where will they go?
Sorry? Well, that's why we'll be wanting to increase the supply of state and social housing. We've talked about a review of KO, which is coming together now, but also opening up community housing providers. We want to expand the private rental market as well, and we also need to expand the actual supply of houses. We have supply problems in our housing sector for ownership, for rents, for state and social housing, and also for emergency housing. So by working on these goals, it forces us to have conversations about what we're doing to deliver in general. Claire?
So just in terms of chunking it down, as you might say, are there Are there interim goals on the way there? Because that's 2 elections away before you can expect to be held accountable for these targets.
Yeah, well, what I'll be doing is I'm chairing the strategy committee of Cabinet. That's where we discuss the quarterly work plans, but also the progress against the goals and the targets. We'll be able to actually bring the CEs and the ministers in to jointly discuss what are some of the root causes of why we're not making sufficient progress or fast enough progress along the way. But these are markers and targets set out to the end of December 2030.
Obviously, you won't be changing them as you go, because last time they were introduced, sometimes they were changed from percentage reductions to flat numbers to make them easier to achieve. Can you promise you won't be doing that with these targets?
Look, this is what we think is the right way for us to set out and to focus. What are we trying to do here? We're trying to focus the public service. I want to focus our ministers and our government, and also want the New Zealand people to understand these are the things that they tell us are important to them. There is lots of other indicators. There's lots of other things we've got to do as a government, don't get me wrong, but these are the ultimate outcomes that we actually need to be really focused on as a country.
How's the public service going to be resourced to meet them?
Oh, well, I mean, we want this is what's going to help the public service get very, very focused with the resources that they have. We want them to actually stop the dumb spending on programs that aren't working and delivering these goals. We want them to make sure that they're actually, in terms of back office efficiency, that's as efficient as it can be, remove the consultants, the contractors, and focus on frontline delivery of these goals.
Have you asked them what happened with the Suicide Prevention Office and that miscommunication between the Ministry and the Minister?
Look, I think on that one you heard the Ministry of Health say they didn't adequately brief the Minister. It was good to see the Minister jump in and actually say, look, he wants the function of the Suicide Prevention Office to continue, and that will happen.
The second time though that something's happened, it happened with Penny Simmons and the Disability Carers Allowance. Are you happy with what's happening, the communications with ministers and the Ministry?
Yes, we've got a big government with lots of programs and lots of expenditure and lots of change happening, and I think our ministers are doing a very good job of actually being on top of the detail of it, and we're expecting those CEs of those major agencies to deliver those savings for us, and we want to do that while we actually get rid of the inefficiencies in the back office. We want to prioritise the frontline services. We do want to make sure the programs are hooked up to the goals that I'm talking about today, and that's what's going to force these conversations, because I think we've got to go back and look at the recent history. We had an 84% increase in government spending. We hired 16,000 more public servants. We hired a record number of consultants. And yet every single one of these measures, of these 9 measures, went backwards over that period of time. And so we need to be able to actually say, this has got to focus our system so that we actually say, this is what we're all working towards. And delivering some of those goals, if you think about the emergency department waitlist times, for example, and getting more people through an emergency department faster and quicker, a lot of that's actually going to lead us into conversations about, well, why is it so hard to get access to a GP? And a whole bunch of other downstream things that actually lead ultimately into that target.
So have you asked
Sorry, Jenna.
Is the 50,000 reduction in benefit numbers only a target for those deemed work ready, or does it include those on the job seeker that are there for health and disability?
It's actually the total job seeker beneficiaries, and what it is saying is if you're on job seeker, as we've discussed before, you could be ready to work between now or within a 2-year period. There are even those that are on health that are still on the job seeker benefit that want to get into work. It might be part-time work, as we've discussed before, but for us, what has been unacceptable is 70,000 more people on a job seeker benefit, 130,000 people in net migration coming into New Zealand, and actually we're not doing a good service by those people by sending them out into welfare for so long. The average adult now, once on benefit, is actually there now for 13 years on average. The under 25 is there for 24 years. Well, we're not going to just consign them to a life on welfare. We really have to do everything we care about those young people. We want them in work.
To see the number on job seeker for health and disability reasons drop.
Again, we've looked at it at a total job seeker level. We want to work for people who are on health and disability who want to work. That's why they're on that benefit. They're not in a supported living environment, as we've discussed before. But they may want to do part-time work. They may want to get work ready. They might want to do more programs in preparation for work. We want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to get people off welfare and into work, where we think there's a much better future for them and their families.
You mentioned that benefit numbers have gone up 70,000 in the last 6 years,
Yep.
but you only want to drop them 50,000. Why don't you want to go back to 2017?
Well, I'd just like to stop having, at the moment we've had 70,000 people added to unemployment. We've got to stabilise that and we've got to bring it down, and that's where the 50,000 comes in.
You've got 6 years to do it, so why would you not set a target? Because you keep saying that 70,000 were added, so why would you not set the target from where it would began?
Well, we've set it at
last economist?
50,000. We think that's a pretty good go. We know we're going to have a larger economy. We know we've got some difficulties going economically at the moment with respect to unemployment, with respect to 4 of our last 5 quarters, the economy not growing. We need to get that turned around and sorted as quickly as we possibly can, get the economy growing, create employment opportunities for people, get them off welfare, get them into work, do everything we can to support them in that transition. With respect to job coaches, a whole bunch of support that we can put into place, but we need to be able to get New Zealand actually growing again. A lot of it's about getting people back to work.
That number, could you talk a little bit about how you arrived at it? Because obviously there's a lot of things feeding into that: population growth, the economy size, the state of the economy. How did you land at that 50,000?
Yeah, look, those were conversations that were had with the individual ministers and their CEs and then amongst themselves as well. And then they came and we had a process that we ran through over the last couple of months, just making sure we had a comfort level about these goals. What I just say to you though is when you look at them, they are all very ambitious, and I get it. People are going to say, oh, you've set it too hard or too high. Actually, we have to do that because we have a fantastic country with so much potential in this place, and we have to say, look, enough is enough. The excuses have to stop. We've got to march the show forward with a bit of ambition, a bit of aspiration, positivity, and celebrating excellence. So we're going to get into this stuff big time and push hard for it.
Clarification on that 13 years average number. Is that a forecast? Because I think in January 2023, the average time on the benefit was 3.3 years or something.
Yeah, I can give you the stats afterwards, but basically what we were looking at was adults on main benefits from memory. It had previously been at 10 years as it was life on welfare. It had now driven up over to 13 years. Likewise with under 25s on benefits, it had driven up to 24 years. And so again, that's why the goals in themselves are provocations for conversations to take place between the ministers and the agencies and myself actually through the strategy committee to make sure that we're doing everything we can to deal with these numbers. So for example, in that case, when you think about getting people off the job seeker benefit into work, and you think about the value of what we're going to spend in the next 6 years actually supporting people on welfare, we're better to take some of that money and surge it and do social investment properly, so that we can actually get people set up for success. So we want enhancing economic productivity to be the basis for all our economic policies. We want social investment to be the basis for all our social policies, and emission reductions obviously for our environmental policies.
So just on emissions reduction, you call it hugely ambitious, but you've actually given yourself rooms for emissions to grow.
Sorry?
You've given yourself room for emissions to grow every year to 2025. Where's the ambition?
No, what I just say with that is it's actually a targets thing in the sense of what this is the emissions reductions budgets 1 and 2, which are over different year periods. So if you think about it, one is actually over, I think, a 4-year period and the other's over a 5-year period, just by virtue of how it was created at the time. What we're saying is we supported the emissions reductions budgets of the previous government. We want to make sure that they are delivered. Obviously, we've got to write a third emissions budget for 2030 to 2035 that continues to plot us on that pathway to net carbon zero by 2050.
You've also talked to big game in opposition about having targets, ministerial KPIs, public sector KPIs, lots of sub-goals. ACT also promised to come along, but this is just 9, marketing. You're not going to get judged.
No, I disagree completely. I utterly disagree completely.
Well, is there going to be...
There have been no targets in the previous administration, and look how badly we've been served, and the New Zealand people have been served. These are the 9 targets that matter the most. These are the targets that actually force a really powerful conversation to take place about, well, what are we doing to get from 46% to 80% regular school attendance for our kids? And so that sparks a whole bunch of conversations around the policies, the programs and the plans that we need to be able to put in place to be able to improve those results. There is, of course, by each portfolio, a different set of indicators that we're looking at very closely, so we make sure that these goals are not gamed. We make sure that we're making sure that social investment's at the heart of these public service goals as well. But no, I disagree with you completely. We need to set some ambition in this country, and when we just sit there every month with random numbers coming through at us saying how many kids are going to school regularly, and it's the same number and it's worse than all of our competitors around the world of similar countries that we think are like-minded to us, that has to stop. And so that's why we're setting some ambition, and it will force some conversations about what are we doing to actually get them
You
there.
actually haven't set any ambition
there won't be...
Sorry?
Just to be clear though, and I shouldn't have said the word marketing, there won't be other targets added in different areas. This is it.
These are the 9 big rocks that we think actually for New Zealanders sitting out there in New Zealand that matters the most to them. in terms of, you think about the topics we've picked around education, housing, health, the environment, law and order. Those are important things to New Zealanders. These are the big things. Of course, there's other indicators. Of course, there's lots of other things the government will be doing. But we want to focus the public service. We want to focus our cabinet and our ministers, and we want to focus for the New Zealand people to say this is the things that you should be judging us by and holding us account to.
Is DPMC going to create a delivery unit under your instruction to drive these targets and or other targets?
Yeah, they've got a very narrow scope to monitor regularly. As I said, quarterly reporting will be going out to the public, and also we'll have more monthly reporting going through to me with the strategy committee as well.
Does that mean you're changing the shape of the implementation unit?
Well, the implementation unit has stopped, and what we're doing is creating a small targeted delivery unit that's actually designed to help us deliver this.
Unit stop.
It's part of our ongoing process around reshaping DPMC.
Brand new surgical centre at North Shore Hospital sitting empty because it can't be staffed. How is that going to affect the target of...
Yeah, well, that's utterly disappointing, isn't it? And as a function of actually not having got the workforce in place. And so, well, that's where Health New Zealand are talking to the Minister about that today and yesterday as well, to make sure that they can actually get the staff there and get that up and running. But that is an example and a byproduct of actually not dealing with the workforce in the health sector, not dealing with the targets, and not actually getting the frontline money out of the bureaucracy to the frontline services where they need to be.
If it wasn't for the targets...
Sorry?
So if it wasn't for the fact that targets would be set, it would be staffed by now?
Well, basically, what I'm saying to you in the healthcare agenda, we've got to make sure we raise significantly our workforce. That's why you've seen us announce a third medical school. That's why you've seen us make sure we've got medical staff on the green list for rapid importation of staff, of immigrants into New Zealand. But we've also got, we've done a lot of things in the health space already. There's a lot more for us to do. But yes, that is a function of actually not having the workers initially to get that facility up and running. We need to get it up and running quickly. Health New Zealand Minister will keep working through that.
Some of the criticism about targets in the past is that they've had kind of adverse impacts, that the public service is focused so much on one thing that other flow-on effects happen. And I just wonder if you've put anything in place, sorry to keep banging on about the benefits, but is there a risk that people will not be able to access the disability benefit or the sickness and health and disability part of the job seeker benefit because MSD is so focused on keeping those numbers down? People won't be able to access what they need.
No, because the nature of how I plan to run it is that as chairing the strategy committee, in would come Debbie Power, the CEO of MSD, in would come Louise Upston, the minister relevant who's responsible for that. The two of them together are meeting with us in a cabinet committee, actually discussing, well, how is the progress going? And we're looking at other supporting indicators to make sure we're getting a quality of result, not just a gaming of the target. And that's quite possible to do because you actually have a series of other indicators that you're looking for. So, for example, Jenna, it's very easy to actually move. There's different challenge. There are some people who have been long-term unemployed for a long period of time, and that's a much harder challenge to retrain and reskill them and to set them up for success in work than it is, say, for others that may have just recently come on to the job seeker benefit and in between jobs. We don't want the focus just to go to the easy bits. We've actually got to be able to have a conversation with ourselves in those meetings to actually say, well, what are we doing and how are we using social investment in particular to actually deal with the long-term unemployed, the much harder cases where people need a lot more support to be able to transition off welfare and into work. And so that's why I say to you, don't look at it as a single one-dimensional sort of thing. He's got some targets here. The targets are there to drive a conversation and, more importantly, actions that actually get us moving forward and into the right direction that we want to get to.
Quickly to return to Mikey's first question, are you comfortable with 900 youth offenders being recidivist offenders?
No, but I want to start somewhere, and knowing how difficult it has been and watching what has happened over the recent years, where clearly what we've been doing hasn't been working, I think that is a pretty serious goal. We've seen rising levels of young people in offending. We've got a number of initiatives coming around serious youth offender categories. We've got our military academies coming, but we've also got an awful lot of work to do to get social investment up and running and to get the right community support services around those young people as well. And I think, it's not to say that we won't work with everybody. We will work with as many as we can. And but I'm just wanting to put a starter for 10 because, man, it would be great to have a 15% lower level of offending. Well, it may not be to you, but it's given the scope of the problem that we've got and to make sure that our systems actually are working and we're getting all the right community partners involved that can actually deal with it. I think it's a good starting place.
Because in your first answer there, you said looking at how difficult it is. Is that the problem? Is that it's too difficult to kind of find?
No, not at all. It's just that
you're standing up here today talking a lot about ambition and being ambitious with these targets, but 15% doesn't seem ambitious. So why have you not made it higher? Is it too difficult?
Well, I just say to you, we have had a major challenge around ram raids, around youth offending, as you've seen over the last few years, right? And so we have to get on top of that really quickly and as fast as we possibly can. I'm not meaning to be unambitious. I'm just setting a target out there and making it very clear. If we can over-deliver it, overachieve it, set a new one, I'd be very happy to set a new one there.
Target though, because you've set targets of 75%.
Well, I'd say at the moment,
when with youth offenders, it's 15.
Well, I just say to you, on all of these 9 indicators, everything has been going south in the wrong direction. We have to stop it heading south and continuing to get worse. We have to stabilise it, and then we actually have to lift it and get it to a much better place. And so I think, I appreciate your point, and it may well be, and I'd love it to be a lot higher, and that would be great. But I'm telling you, I want social investment in the bloodstream of how we do things in government. I think we've got a bit of work to move it from theory into action, to work with the partners that are actually getting the outcomes and the results for these young people in particular, and also making sure we get that balance right of stick and carrot.
How many staff will the delivery unit have?
I can't remember. I can get that to you later. But it's again very focused on delivering against these 9 goals and facilitating that conversation in the strategic subcommittee.
And what's the sort of idea behind it? Does it draw from the sort of deliverology concept out of the Tony Blair government?
Well, what I'd say is it's not what we saw before with what was, I think, the previous government called an implementation unit. That is the job of ministers and government agencies and everybody to deliver and to implement and to get things done. What this is about is making sure that we are making progress against these 9 major goals that we have. We look at other supporting indicators that support the delivery of these goals, and more importantly, it forces a good conversation with our policy people to say, well, is that program actually working to get that outcome, or is it not? Let's stop that, let's take the money off that and put it behind this program, which is getting better outcomes.
Where does the concept come from, though? I mean, DPMC officials met, I think, with delivery associates, a consulting firm, to discuss this. Did they meet with?
Well, I just say to you, I've come from a commercial world, as you know. It's quite normal when you want to get things turned around, you have a focus on outcomes. But I'd also say to you, go look at Singapore, go look at Estonia, go look at New South Wales state governments, for example, that run things in very similar ways and have had great success focusing their public service and their resources on delivering these goals. The exciting thing here is that if you're a government agency, now you've got real clarity. And so the question is, well, what do we do differently? What do we have to change? How much bolder, more innovative can we be to actually make progress on these goals? What is it that we have to do differently? Just more of the same isn't going to deliver it because it's not working for us. It hasn't been working. What's been working in Singapore, Estonia, New South Wales? What's been working in bits of New Zealand that we need to say that's a great program that's dealing with that issue? Why don't we actually scale that up and make sure that happens across the whole of New Zealand? Stop this dumb stuff over here and move the money from there to there. So CEOs or prime ministers get to work with a given set of resources, and I know a lot of you think, I'm coming from a CEO background. Make no apologies about that because it hasn't worked for us the last 6 years. Having career politicians delivering results or improved results for New Zealanders, but you get to do different things with those resources, and you get to make decisions about how you can better deploy a fixed set of resources and the trade-offs that you have to make to get those outcomes. And so,
Prime Minister, what advice did you take in respect to the youth offending rates? What advice did you take in respect to law and human rights, legal rights of the tamariki, rangatahi and human rights breaches? Is that one of the reasons why your targets are so low?
No, it hasn't been a consideration whatsoever, because actually the bigger consideration is here, what are the root causes of what are causing young people to offend in the way that they are in New Zealand? Why have we had a big explosion of that? Those are the questions that we want to be able to answer and solve for, and that's why we want to design the programs and policies to deliver against those problems.
But did you get any legal or right?
No, our focus is on saying it is unacceptable where we sit today. And if we just start to say that's how things are in New Zealand and we're prepared to accept that, well, I'm sorry, we're not. That's why we came to government.
So you also mentioned New South Wales. Will you be adopting some of the methods that they use for their youth offenders, like sax overheads or
No.
Will you be introducing those? Well, what do you mean
by
what I mean on youth crime?
Well, what we've said before is there's a whole range of policies as we go through the course of the next few years to make sure that we are putting the policies in place, whether it's around social investment, working with community organisations. I've sat down with a number of them that are doing amazing work with these young people, 14, 15, 16, that have had their first or second or third offending experiences. We've got to work out which of those programs are working, turn off the money to the ones that aren't going anywhere and aren't delivering results, put more money and more resources behind those that are. The point we're starting with is, here's the problem we're trying to solve, and then here's the solutions that deliver against that problem. What I have felt coming into politics in the last 3 years is it's a unique place where we end up having a whole bunch of solution that is ideological, that often roams around trying to attach to a problem, whereas in my world you define your problem really clearly and then you put common sense practical solutions to deal with that problem. And so with respect,
any of those punitive measures?
no, I was referencing New South Wales with respect to saying other jurisdictions and other states and or countries have used targets, which was the question I was asked for before. Jason.
The Remuneration Authority is currently in the process of reviewing MPs' pay and salary. Is now the right time to be upping what MPs earn?
Look, again, those are decisions for the Independent Remuneration Authority. It's not for a Prime Minister or an MP to comment on their pay. We've set up an Independent Remuneration Authority for that very reason. We need to let them run through their process and see where they get to.
The recommendation comes back to you. It's likely that they'll impose some sort of increase, or they'll recommend that. If there is a recommendation to increase MPs' pay that comes across your desk, will you accept it?
Look, I'm just not going to get into that because we have set this up with an Independent Remuneration Authority for a particular reason over many years of learning, to say that MPs should not be involved in setting their own pay. I think the Remuneration Authority, let's let them do their work, and they're in that process now.
Just one more. Wouldn't it show quite a bit of leadership from you that while you're cutting jobs in the public sector, that you took a stand, or you stood up and said, no, we're not actually going to receive a pay increase?
So Jason, I don't know how to be any clearer. There is a process that has been set up under successive governments to have an independent review authority to look at MP pay. I am not involved with that. I don't want to be involved with that. That should be a decision for the Independent Remuneration Authority to do so. You do not want MPs making decisions about their own pay, and that's why it was set up in an independent way. Let's let them do their work, and let's see what they come up with.
On voluntary redundancies at the Ministry for the Environment, it's prompted the PSA to describe the government as short-sighted and shallow, and that it's prioritising tax cuts over the environment. What do you say to that?
I've seen lots of statements from the PSA, but what I just say to you first and foremost is that, let's be clear, any job losses, whether in the private sector or the public sector, are incredibly difficult for people impacted and also their families. And so let's start there, first and foremost. What we've said in the public sector is that we actually need our public sector CEOs and agencies to deliver savings. We believe that there are inefficiencies in the back office of these government agencies. We want them to prioritise the protection of frontline services, and we also want them to be able to make sure that they are delivering against these goals that we're setting. And so if that means stop the dumb stuff, stop working on projects that actually aren't leading to the improvement of these outcomes or these results, let's move the money and the resources from the back office to the front line, so be it. And so the CEOs have been charged with delivering savings, as you well know, 6.5% or 7.5%. How they deliver that, given they are closest to it, to make the choices within their own organisation to say how they make trade-offs between the different resources they have in order to deliver these goals. And so, I think many of them are coming back and cutting out on consultancy spends. Many of them are looking at their back office functions, saying, have we got that optimised, working right, or is that just bureaucracy? And in some cases, sadly, yes, there'll be job losses.
Just on AUKUS.
Sorry, I'll just come back. I was going to let Felix ask.
Just on AUKUS, New Zealand's been in discussion for months now. So if Japan is about to sign up, how serious are Kiwis to join in too?
Well, look, again, there have been no formal announcements. I've read some of the reports as well. As I've said, our position is no different from the previous government. We're open to exploring AUKUS Pillar 2, and that's a conversation that will be ongoing through the course of this year.
What expertise would New Zealand bring to AUKUS?
Again, I'm not going to get into that. All we've signalled is that we want to explore looking at what the opportunities for New Zealand might be under Pillar 2.
Prime Minister, in terms of the...
Sorry, I'll come back. Sorry.
In January, your government deployed personnel to the Middle East.
Yes.
At the time, you said it was wrong to conflate the issues in Israel and Gaza with the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea. Do you stand by that?
Yes, I do. Yes. Well, we believe in the values of freedom of navigation. We're a small trading nation and we believe in international law. We saw a situation where there were a number of countries that had their ships attacked, and we're backing up our values with actual action, and that's why we sent 6 personnel there as part of that targeting team to work there.
We've seen some of the foreign affairs advice that your ministers considered at the time, and it said that the events in Israel and its war with Hamas there have been broader effects impacting New Zealand's trade interests, and it mentioned the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea. Doesn't that contradict your statement that you shouldn't conflate?
No, I disagree. I disagree. To conflate those two issues, I don't think is fair.
Isn't that what the advice was doing?
Sorry?
Isn't that what the advice from officials was doing?
No, I wouldn't. I would dispute that. What I'd say to you is that there has been a particular challenge in the Red Sea where New Zealand sends a huge amount of its exports through, as do many other nations around the world. We saw indiscriminate attacks on ships, and as a result, we believe in a certain set of values, as I've said before, and in our foreign policy reset, it's very important for us that we stand up to those values. And so when we believe in things like freedom of navigation as a small trading nation, that's important. When we believe in the international law, and so for us to send a small team of 6 to be part of a coalition response, that's important. What I would just say to you is, without doubt, what we're seeing in Gaza is utterly unacceptable. We want to see an end to hostilities there. We've been calling for that for some time. I've tried to coordinate the positions of, joint statements with Prime Ministers from Australia and Canada in particular in recent months. As you've seen, you go look at our statements in the General Assembly. We know that a military action is not the way we get peace in Gaza. We need the peace process to kick off. We need the parties to get around the table. Hamas needs to release the hostages. Israel needs to make sure that it's not indiscriminately targeting civilians or civilians getting caught up, and get humanitarian aid into there as quickly as possible. But they need to get around the table, and a peace process needs to be commenced to get to a two-state solution.
Do you accept there's a link between what's happening in Israel and Gaza and the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea?
We made the decision to send 6 New Zealanders to the Red Sea because we believe in a set of values around the international rule of law. We believe in the freedom of navigation. We are a small trading nation, and we're going to back that up with our support.
You see the link between the two of these?
I've also seen Houthi attacks on ships that have got nothing to do with Israel as well in that region.
As part of Callaghan Innovations' proposed cuts, they're looking at targeting 30 jobs that are of scientists and engineers. Are you comfortable with that, seeing as your government is one that wants to further technology and innovation?
Well, look, again, as I said, those are decisions for the CEO of Callaghan in that case, in that instance. I think there is a bigger, broader question which we'll talk through in the coming months ahead, which is our growth plan for New Zealand really relies on us actually embracing science, technology and innovation big time. And we have to do a much better job of getting our Crown Research Institutes and our universities and our research and development spend from our businesses joined up, working together on actually commercialising our science, technology and innovation. We do a great job with our scientists. We've got some of the smartest people, I think, in the world, but we do a very, very poor job of commercialising that science for the benefit of New Zealanders, and that's what I want to see us step change over time.
So, Prime Minister, in respect to your government targets, will you resign if you don't reach those targets?
I don't think that's necessary, because I think the New Zealand people are going to be able to judge us on our performance and progress against those targets with elections. But what I'm telling you is I am deeply committed. I am deeply committed to getting things done for New Zealanders. That's why I've come to do this job. That's why I've come into politics 3 years ago. We have a fantastic country. It is jam-packed with huge amounts of potential, but we have to get the show on the road. And part of it is...
Take responsibility, though, if you don't reach those
Well, I'll take ultimate responsibility, but the New Zealand public will have their say every 3 years in an election.
Resign if you don't
Every 3 years in an election, they'll have their say. These are goals to get us to December 2030. There'll be plenty of time for that.
A couple of questions on behalf of a colleague about the survey that was released today about media trust. Are politicians partly to blame for eroding trust in the media?
No, I don't think so. I think, I haven't seen the data first and foremost, so it's probably inappropriate for me to comment. But I just say all of our institutions, whether they're politicians, media, we all need to be working on our own ability to make sure that we're building our institution and its trust that it has with the New Zealand people.
Headline figure out of it is that the report shows only 30% of Kiwis trust the news media. Does that worry you?
Well, I think it's as I said earlier in recent weeks, I said that's something obviously for the media sector and the media industry to start to think and reflect upon, to make sure that it is actually building trust with the New Zealand people.
Do you think politicians have a role to play in maintaining public trust of a functioning media as a pillar of democracy?
Well, the primary responsibility sits with you and the media industry yourselves to make sure that you are building your social licence, you're building your trust with the New Zealand people, that they trust you to tell the story straight and to do it as you should. We in government have a job to make sure our government has high levels of trust as well.
Prime Minister, do
Sorry?
you trust Do you trust the media?
I think you do a great job. I think you're a really important part of our democracy. I may not agree with everything you say about me over the last 3 years, as I'm sure every other politician of any political party would say to you as well. But I think you are an absolutely critical part of our fabric of our democracy, of a liberal democracy. We want a strong media institution, and it needs to be able to build back trust with the New Zealand people.
The firearms minister has been accused of misleading the public over the number of people allowed to have prohibited semi-automatics. Have you spoken to her about?
Look, I haven't, and I
numbers that she uses?
haven't seen those reports, and I just would ask you to direct those comments to the minister herself. But
really important work.
But what I'd say is that she is very committed to firearm safety. She's very committed to making sure we get the balance right.
On the public service,
Sorry.
On the public service cuts, is it your expectation that ministers go line by line through these dumb projects, or is it an operational issue?
Look, from my point of view, I want the ministers to be aware of, they need to be aware of the savings that are happening within their purview and within their portfolio. I want them to be really understanding exactly what is going on within their portfolios.
Why is it that the minister seems to be caught out by media reports about his own ministry, and the same happened, I guess, with the fly cutter?
I disagree. I think what you saw was a minister and a Ministry of Health that said it itself didn't adequately brief the minister, but importantly the minister has signalled very clearly that his expectation as the function of the Suicide Prevention Office would continue. Sorry, Ben?
Winston Peters is spending a week in Washington and
Yes.
New York, taking high-level meetings. You might say he's bringing fresh energy to the relationship. What is the status of New Zealand under the ANZUS Treaty?
Well, we're very supportive of ANZUS, clearly, but what you're seeing is a all-of-government effort for us to lift our intensity in our foreign affairs relationships, because whether it's around foreign affairs, whether it's around defence, whether it's around trade and security, we are having a full-court press, particularly with Ministers Macleay, Peters, Collins and myself, to make sure that we actually are lifting our engagement with our traditional partners and friends, and also new partners as well.
To commit to any sort of new architecture around that. I'm not necessarily talking about AUKUS, but there has been discussion that New Zealand's not in ANZUS, at all. Is it time to reaffirm?
No, you've heard us come out before Christmas, and I think for the first time in a long time declare with our 2+2 meetings with their Australian counterparts, which I've instituted since I met with Prime Minister Albanese, that actually we've declared very strongly our wanting to be a very important part of our ANZUS relationship and to renew that.
Is it your intention to represent New Zealand at the NATO summit in July?
Sorry?
Is it your intention to represent New Zealand at the NATO summit?
Again, I won't talk about that. I'll talk about that close to the time. But as you know, we've been well represented as affiliates of NATO. Yep.
You mentioned Estonia as a comparator country a couple of times there. What is it about Estonia that we should compare ourselves to?
Well, I guess the thing is, there are so many great things about New Zealand, right? Like, there are things that we just do brilliantly better than any country on earth. But I also believe that you should learn from others, because what's the point of us repeating the same mistakes if we can get some insights as to how someone else has dealt with it? So if I look at Estonia, for example, I look at them and the way that they have digitised government service and put a customer service mentality into their government public services is really fantastic. They probably do that now better than Singapore. I look at Ireland a lot because I look at them with respect to the research and development and how they've built an ecosystem that actually now leads to, they've got many, many billion-dollar plus companies out there in the world raising huge amounts of exports, and Ireland now is twice as wealthy as New Zealand. I look at New South Wales because they've done some good things around infrastructure development, as has Victoria. That's why I went and met with the Premier of Victoria when I was in Melbourne recently, because they've done some great work on public infrastructure.
It's also turned around its education system.
Big time.
A couple of the programs that they used were universal free school lunches and only having 3 exams, one in Estonian, one in maths and one in a subject of choice. Would you learn from that?
Well, there's lots that we can learn from lots of places, and as you've seen, I could look at education systems in Denmark as well. I'd look at Estonia. I'd look at what Ireland has done, for example, around education.
Isn't it to keep free school lunches? That's good evidence to keep free school lunches.
Well, I just say to you, there's lots for us to learn. If you look at Ireland, they've also done a great job on education. And why are we so hot on education? Why am I personally so agitated about it and determined to change it? Is because, as I've said before, I'm a kid whose parents left school at 15, 16. I did well in the world because I had a good education and I was able to go out and do well for myself. I want that for every Kiwi kid. But we know that there are really high-paying, great jobs coming for the New Zealand economy. But if we can't get our kids to school and we can't get them educated right, how on earth are they supposed to access those jobs? And so that's why you're seeing such a big focus on those 2 goals. Get the kids to school, get them ready to go for high school.
Lunches be part of the attendance plan tomorrow?
What you've seen very clearly for us, despite what you have seen online, is that we are very committed to the school lunch program. We just want to make sure that all programs are efficient and are working as effectively as they possibly can be.
Universal?
All right, team. Thanks so much. Appreciate your time. All right, take care.